Salve, Dominus. Welcome to Rome. I am Nathanias, a friend of your father's. We served together in the Dacian Wars. Welcome. Behind me you'll see the mausoleum. Have you been to Rome before? Well, there's much to learn. Your father said he wants me to teach you all that I know. And so I have a map that talks about how great our empire is. You've journeyed here from Brittania, if I'm not mistaken. Some 60-odd days as the crow flies. I see, from Londinium. I have not been there. It must have been quite an interesting journey. You must be very tired. Well, perhaps we should go to the forum to my study. And we can relax and then go to look at this map. Yes, things have changed a lot. Many of the buildings are now brick, no longer are they marble. The politics have also changed as well. A Spanish emperor. In my time, it would not have existed, but things are quite different now. As I said, you must be exhausted. Let us go to my study on the forum, and we can relax and talk about this map. As a soldier, I will keep you protected. Trust me. Alright. After you, let us go. Rome awaits. Well, now that we've entered my study, let's take a look at this Roman map. This map is from 107 AD, which was the height of the Roman Empire. Let's go ahead and explore this map a little bit further. Open it up and see what we can find. Let's zoom in for a closer look. So, this is the extent of the empire, Dominus. As you can see, we have gone far to the east, and also to the north, and to the south as well. This period followed, as you may have heard, Nerva. After him, Emperor Trajan, who was of Spanish descent, took control of the empire. And Hadrian as well followed him. Essentially, things have changed. The trade has grown. The empire is expanding. Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny the Younger. New cities have been founded throughout the world. So let us begin by taking a closer look. So, as you know, you're from here, Brittania. Brittania has been governed by Rome since 43 AD. Julius Caesar in 55 BC conquered the Celtic tribes and installed a friendly king, Mundabratius, and returned to Gaul, leaving it under Roman control. It's been that way since Boudicca's uprising. You can see Brittania, Londinium, Isca. This is Caledonia, which is Scotland, now Scotland. Here, during the Roman Empire, it's referred to as Caledonia, and the Roman legions have taken control here since 71 AD. Caledonia is also conquered, annexed under Petilius Cerealis, and in the 70s and the 80s, BC, Rome conquered these lands. This is Hibernia, which is the classical name for Ireland. And you can see Dublin over here, already was a little establishment here. This was discovered in 320 BC, and Ptolemy wrote about it. And then later, the Roman historian Tacitus wrote in 98 AD. He used the name Hibernia. The conquest of Britain continued under the command of Gnaeus Julius Agricola, who expanded the empire to Caledonia, and appears where the Battle of Mons Sugrapius, where the casualties were 10,000 on the Caledonians and 360 on the Roman side. After that, the Romans killed between 100,000 and 200,000 of these Britons. So they took over this land, and they settled in many parts of Brittania. So this was a very important part of the empire at one time, and Hadrian's Wall, of course, is here. So we're gonna go ahead and move to the next place. So this is Gaul. Gauls were a Celtic people of Western Europe in the Iron Age, in the Roman period. And they spread over much of France, Belgium, the Netherlands, even Spain. But it was never united under a single leader. And they reached their the Roman Republic was rising after the First Punic War, and that put a lot of pressure on Gaul. Finally, Gaul was conquered by Julius Caesar in the 50s, or 50 BC. So, this really began in 121 BC. That was the beginning. And then in about 50 BC, that's when Julius Caesar came and took control. At some point, it amalgamated into a hybrid culture. So, Roman pretty much took over at that point, and it was replaced the Gaulish language with a late Latin. Of course, then the Visigoths and Burgundians and the Franks came around and took control from them. So, here we can see some of the different cities here. They're very different. And of course, you would have traveled from Brittania and Londinium south here. Cariolanum, I believe is how it's pronounced. I'm probably mispronouncing that. So let's move on. It goes to Bona. Gergovia. Aransto. So now we are going to move down to the southern part of the empire. And we see Spain. See some interesting cities here. Catagores, Stilo, Valencia, Valencia. And this was known as Hispania, and it was divided into two provinces. In Mauritania, we're going to go down here. The first century, Emperor Claudius divided the Roman province into two parts. And, of course, the neighboring areas here, which we'll talk about soon, are also related as well. And the ancient tribes of Mauritania were Berber peoples, primarily agricultural, and some of the first Saharan people to abandon their historically nomadic lifestyle. So, let's continue here. Also, let's add a few things where Morocco sort of would be. And they were known as the Mari people. And then 27 BC, that the kings of Mauritania became Roman vassals. And that's when it all split up here into the various different sections here. So, this here it's hard to read this, but it was, I think, Sativus. Sativus. That was a town here. I do a lot of research, but it was the capital of the Roman province called Brittania, Sitifensis, and it's in Algeria. So, the name of the city is of Numidian origin. We can see it borders Numidia here, and means black. The modern city was founded by the French on the ruins of the ancient one. In 97 AD, Sativus was founded by the Romans. Although no buildings of this period are known, there is a cemetery that seems to have contained tombs from the early colony. Let's move over here to Numidia. And Numidia is another Berber kingdom. And it is now a part of Algeria, a smaller part of Tunisia, in the Maghreb. The polity was centered next to, obviously over here, is in this general region, and it was a sovereign state initially, but then became a Roman client state. So, it is one of the first major states in the history of Algeria and the Berber world. This is an interesting one here. I don't know if you can see this, but Gatuli here. Gatuli. And this is another Romanized name for the ancient Berber tribes of Gatulia. And they were, bordering the Sahara Desert. And there are several historians, Roman ones, that refer to them just collectively as Libyans and Gatuli. However, it was sort of a misinformation due to the cultural barrier. So, the Gatuli, according to the Romans, were rude and uncivilized folk who were governed neither by institutions nor law, nor were they subject to anyone's rule. But Pliny the Elder does claim they are different from other Numidian tribes, even though they have the same language. So, it's an ethnic division amongst the Berber tribes, of which I'm no expert. So, let's go on here. Well, one interesting thing is they used... Well, actually, here's another interesting one. Let's move over here. This is... nathanasmrs. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but this is they're centered around the desert, and they use war chariots like the Garamantes. They do assault Greek colonies during the Peloponnesian War. They helped defend the town of Sparta. Augustus attempted to pacify these desert tribes, but they rose up when the Romans tried to extort money from them. Very interesting. Let's go over here to Africa. This is what the Romans call Africa. This country here. And it has changed, but this is another Berber society, and they kept a pretty constant opposition. Trajan established a frontier in the city, and then the Romans, as they developed in Scythia, they moved further west and east, and using the military roads, they took control here as well. So, relatively in this area, the Romans had about 28,000 troops. So, later on, these garrisons were inhabited by local tribes. So, obviously, Claudius, Nerva, Trajan, all colonized, settled this area, aside from Carthage. And the biggest in this area is Tipasa, Thamagati, just modern Timgad, southeast of Scythia, and Scythia, which is Scythia. This was a very prosperous area in the empire. It was called the granary of the empire, and North Africa became one of the largest exporters of grain in the empire, shipping cereals like Italy and Greece. Other crops included fruit, figs, grapes, and beans. And by the 2nd century AD, their olive oil rivaled cereals as an export item. So now we're moving on to Libya. And Libya is basically was another part of the Carthaginian Empire. And essentially the Romans annexed this area. So Mark Antony, and during that war, that time before 50 BC, they went to North Africa, and then really later with Trajan, the military colonies were repopulated. You can see some of these places here. Essentially, Libya became a very important place for merchants and artisans, and people from Rome would come and travel here to North Africa, where they remained important sources of wine, drugs, and horses. And most of it was in the farm side was Berber farmers. So let's move over here. And now we're going to take a look at Egypt. Egypt was the breadbasket, which, as you can see, here's the Nile, and it produced a greater portion of the empire's grain, in addition to flax, papyrus, glass, and many other goods. The city of Alexandria became a key trading outpost for the Roman Empire, and shipping from Egypt regularly reached India. So, and also Ethiopia. It was one of the leading scientific and technological centers of the empire. They had scholars such as Ptolemy and Aaron and Hypatia. Culturally, the city of Alexandria at times rivaled Rome in its importance. So, Alexandria is right here, as you can see here. So now, first century AD, Alexandria became a very focal point of the Greek culture on the Mediterranean and the nexus of Roman trade routes to the deserts. Around 100 AD, Egyptians continued their funerary traditions and mummified their dead, but they started to incorporate Greco-Roman style hairstyles, dress, and artistic techniques. St. Mark is called the first bishop of the city, and he was martyred here in 66 AD. So, let's move onward. Here's Syria. Damascus, right here. Damascus. Bostra. Palmyra. And Pompey the Great captured Syria in 64 BC. And he established Antioch as his capital. And Antioch was the third largest city in the Roman Empire after Rome and Alexandria, with an estimated population of actually 500,000 people. So, it was an Aramaic-speaking population, and it was one of the most important Roman provinces. It's the key to accessing the East and other trade routes. Now let's take a look here. This is Asia Minor. Anastris. Prusa. Lastra. Isis. And this is obviously Turkey, but it's a Hellenistic area. It was planted by Greek in the 1st century BC. It remained Hellenistic largely. It was the eastern frontier of the Parthian Empire. It was very unstable and led to many wars. It's also the Anatolia, birthplace of minted coinage, and it really was the culminating area of the Roman Parthian Wars. So also in this area, the Sasanian Empire also had control. It was a very dynamic region. So let's move on. Here's another interesting one. This one is Arabia Petraea, also known as Roman Arabian province, simply Arabia, and it was the Kingdom of Jordan. It was annexed by Emperor Trajan, and it was a frontier province in the Roman Empire. but it was held on to, unlike Armenia, Mesopotamia, Syria, as well into Trajan as well, so it was a desert frontier. But it didn't face the constant incursions that these regions here did from the Scythians and the Sarmatians and the Parthians. So this is Armenia, which is really from the 1st century to late antiquity. Armenia Minor was a client state and incorporated as an independent kingdom to the Arsacid dynasty. Although it remained another contentious area here. This is really this whole area between the Parthians and the Romans. There's also a casus belli for the casus belli, mispronounced that, for the Roman-Persian Wars. It was in 114 to 118 that Emperor Trajan was able to conquer and incorporate it permanently. So, the 4th century became its own monarchy. So let's just adjust this here. So we're going to take a look at Iberia. This is Iberia. It was a monarchy in the Caucasus, an independent state, assassinated in the Roman empires. It's also centered in eastern Georgia and the Colchis in the west here, just this little section here. And it's the medieval kingdom of Georgia. Over here we have Albania, and during classical times Albania was home to several Illyrian tribes, also Thracian and Greeks. Greeks kind of colonized on this coast here. So this is the Colchi, and this is another Georgian polity, and it's the earliest Georgian foundation. It's best known in the Jason the Argonaut, Greek mythology. It's the destination of the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece. That was explained as a land rich with gold, iron, timber, and honey. And this is Western Georgians. It's a very complex, diverse area. So this Colchi's right here. Now let's take a look. Now let's take a look at some of the last couple big players here. And this is the Scythians. And the Scythians were given this name by the Greeks. It's all the lands northeast of Europe and the northern coast of the Black Sea. And they were a nomadic people. They controlled large swaths of territory throughout Eurasia and the Black Sea across Siberia to the borders of China. So this goes for a long ways, and it changes over time. Sources show they were a peaceful people, but nomadic. And they preferred a free riding way of life. Unfortunately, no writing has ever been found from this period. So we only know the connections to the regions. Herodotus gives the most descriptive kind of account of this place. And some say he may never have been there. Held went to Sarmatia, which is really broken up into several areas. Asiatic Sarmatia. And this is a modern part of modern Ukraine. So they're also a Iranian confederation as well. And they also originated from the Eurasian steppe. They were part of this wider Scythian free-riding culture. And they began encroaching on the European, or the Roman Empire, and legions with the Germanic tribes, which is why they're all lumped together as enemies here. The red line, enemies, kind of the empire ends. And they began to break through and assimilated into the Proto-Slavic population of Eastern Europe. But again, they were a really big part of that steppe culture. Riding free in the horse, archers, things of that nature. Here we have Dacia, which was conquered by Emperor Trajan. 106 includes Transylvania and Moldavia, excuse me. It was completed or conquered in 2 major campaigns, 98 to 117, and really Romania, Moldova, and smaller parts of Bulgaria, Serbia, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Ukraine. Now, what happened to these people is that the Latin language in ancient Dacia gradually turned into Romanian, and a new people were formed in the Balkan Peninsula. Next we have Thrace, and the Thracians were a group of Indo-European tribes inhabiting a large area in southeastern Europe. And Spartacus, they say, was Thracian, for example. And they spoke a Thracian language. The first account of the Thracians was in the Iliad, during the Macedonian conflict between, or the Iliad, excuse me, in the Trojan War. They were allies. And the conflict between these Rome and Thrace was really unavoidable. Slowly, Thracia became a permanent Roman client state, and they helped Pompey and Caesar. There was Osea here. There's a lot of Roman troops and legions stationed here, and they saw a lot of action from migrating Germanic tribes. That's what I'm going to mispronounce most likely, but this is Moesia. That's right here. Nisus. And Atiaria. And this is the territory of Central Serbia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Northern Bulgaria, and part of Romania. And Emperor Trajan arrived here and launched the first military campaign. So this is related. This kingdom is related to the Dacians, I believe. And part of that cultural sphere. And Trajan took over this area here. So, moving over here now to Macedonia. Macedonia was established in 146 BC after the Roman general Quintus Caecilius Metellus, and he defeated the last self-styled king of Macedonia, so it became a client republic. And this was an administrative area which they called Macedonia, but it included several groups. And the reign of Augustus brought a lot of peace and wealth for Macedonia, though its importance and economic standing was a lot lower than its neighbor here in Asia Minor. So there was a road that went via Egnatia, which was the installation of Roman merchants in the cities and the foundation of Roman colonies all throughout here, this area here. And of course they're interacting with Greece here. Essentially they had very rich, vast arable land and rich pastures. And the ruling class amassed huge fortunes in the society based on slave labor. The improvement of the living conditions of the productive class brought about an increase in the number of artisans and craft people of the region. So it was Greeks. They were widely employed as tutors, educators, and doctors. This area here, Greece is just right there. And the primary export economy was iron, copper, gold, as well as timber, resin, pitch, hemp, flax, and fish. And now we're going to go down here to Greece. And Greece was, if you can imagine, a vacation spot where you go to Europe to experience classical culture. The Romans went to Greece similarly. Athens was an independent city bound to Rome through a friendship alliance. However, by the beginning of the first millennium, Rome dominated the Balkans essentially. So architectural achievements and the influence in art, they spread up across the peninsula. So this area became very vulnerable to the Goths. And so this sort of becomes the hot area here. So we're going to continue on. Some of these areas are very unique. This is Illyricum, which was from 27 BC to about, maybe we want to say 180, a little further than that, excuse me. Well, it's a really next to its neighbor Pannonia and Noricum, but it's coastal Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Montenegro, Albania, and say province. There's Pannonia, which is right here, and that is another province. It was located in western Hungary, present-day Western Hungary, eastern Austria, northern Croatia, northern Slovenia, western Slovakia, northern Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is Noricum. And Noricum was a Celtic kingdom that included modern Austria. It was borders on the Danube, and it's founded in 400 BC. Its capital here was Verona, and also Magdalensburg. Here's another interesting one, Raetia, which is so important. It's sort of the Swiss cultures, which was broken up into about 4 different kingdoms. And it was really eastern and central Switzerland and southern Germany, Bavaria, most of the Baden-Württemberg, and part of northern Lombardy in Italy. So the northern border during Augustus and Tiberius was the River Danube, and later it was a little bit 166 north of kilometers north of the Danube, so linked to the late across the Alps via the Russian Pass by the Via Claudia Augusta. And this would actually be on the route from Londinium, actually through towards Rome, coming in here. So little is really known about the origins of this place, but it was one of the most powerful and warlike of the Alpine tribes. It was reported by Justin and Pliny the Elder, and they were named apparently from their leader, the Raetus. Yeah, this little white area here, Helvetia, which is the female national personification of Switzerland, and is usually shown of a flowing gown with a spear and a shield and placed into it the Swiss flag. And the name of it's a deviation of a Gaulish tribe that inhabited the Swiss plateau prior to the Roman conquest. They were Celtic and occupied most of the Swiss plateau at the time of their contact with the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC. They were subjugated in 52 BC under Augustus, and then a uprising later was crushed, and it was essentially incorporated into the Roman province of Gallia Belgica in 22 BC. And like the rest of Gaul, they were largely Romanized by the 2nd century. There's one more. The Vindelici, which were also a Celtic people. And it comprises northeastern Switzerland, southeastern Baden, and southern Württemberg and Bavaria. And their chief town is assumed to have been the Mepopotamia. This would have been perhaps another spot here to stop along your journey. And now we have Germania, which was the historical region initially inhabited by the Germanic tribes. And it extended from the Danube and the Main in the south to the Baltic Sea. They formed 2 provinces, Germania Inferior to the north, present-day Netherlands, Belgium, and south and western Germany, and Germania Superior to the south, Switzerland, southwestern Germany, eastern France. During this time, Germania was inhabited mostly by Germanic tribes, but also Celts, Scythians, Sarmatians, Pannonians, and it changed over time as the populations shifted. The ancient Greeks were the first to mention Germanians, and also Julius Caesar, of course, wrote in his famous biography about the warlike Germanic tribesmen and their threat to Roman Gaul. Tacitus wrote the most complete account of Germania that still survives. It's unknown where it comes from, but it's most likely Celtic in origin. I want to go to Italy, where there was a lot of stability in Italy during this time. Hadrian's Wall was built in 122, and the world had about 2 or 3 stable rulers. The made buildings and opened trade and conquered Dacia and Parthia. And Marcus Aurelius epitomized the philosopher king. So, a Roman army had about 300,000 soldiers at this time to conquer all this. And a lot of changes in Roman Britain, and Trajan really restored Roman greatness, created policies intended to restore the former economic supremacy of Italy. And of course Hadrian as well. And lastly, we'll see if we can go over this. We have here Scandinavia. And Scandinavia is a very interesting place. Roman Empire it was sort of out of the bounds of the Roman Empire. So they grew rich trading with the Romans. And this says Goths there. So we know they invaded southwards here into Rome. The Roman cartographers described the cold and remote Scania as the sandy reefs in the south, Scandinavia as the Arctic island above, where both men and women ruled. The Scandinavians were more interested in Rome than the other way around, and worked as mercenary soldiers, sold hunting falcons and walrus ivory. And when they would go, they would bring back legends of war, explorations, and a pantheon of gods as well. So, Rome was always present for the Scandinavians, but Scandinavian did not exist for the Romans as much. And interestingly, the Romans never conquered Scandinavia, so they never bothered to take the time to Christianize and Romanize them. So they were just too alien. So the Norse could focus on the outskirts and trading and a unique economic angle. So anyway, this pretty much concludes our exploration of this map. And it's been a lot of fun to see this world and to explore the different parts of it. So, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. So, have a really good night. And I will see you in the morning for your journey onward. Ah, yes, that was quite interesting, was it not? It is very interesting to see these maps and as the empires grow. Kind of interesting peoples. It is an unknown alien world. So I wish you adieu on your way back to Londinium. I know that you will rule wisely. Your father has much faith. And may Zeus bless you.